My name is Allison Field, and I want to welcome you to our YouTube channel, Create Your Blank, where we share stories of amazing people who have created their blank. We share how they got started and what inspired them on their journey of creating where they are today. Our wish is for you to experience your fullest expression so that your life is full of joy and passion because you're connecting with your heart and letting it guide your path. Today, we have Tiffany Bednar with us in the studio, and I'm so excited to have her on with us to share her story. Welcome, Tiffany.
Thanks, Allison.
All right. So good to have you here. So if you could share a little bit about what you currently do out in the world, because I know you do.
People, right? I feel like everybody that I know is into all kinds of great things. So currently I run a cooperative education group out of my home, which just happens to be on a wildlife management reserve. And so we meet 3 days a week and kids come together to, essentially it falls underneath the umbrella of homeschool education. And so we get together and we just learn all the things there is to learn in nature in a really free and loving way. Particularly, I started it in honor of a certification program that I went through on somatic regulation techniques and learning more about my body. So that's what I'm currently up to.
Wow. Okay. So let me take that back a minute. So that is amazing. Number one, that you created this school. And how many kids are you currently serving?
We have 24 right now.
Wow. And you started with how many?
My 3. So this will be my family's 5th year of education at home. And this will be my 3rd year in adult somatic education. And then my first students, we started with 6 of us. So my 3 kids plus 3 others.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
And up to 24.
Yes.
And I love how you share. So, I follow you and I love how you share your daily experiences. And it's not just my background in conventional education is so boring and so unenlightening. And I absolutely love how you post about how your days go.
Thank you.
So I'd love for you to share for the audience. Tell us about a little day in the life of your beautiful school.
Yeah, for sure. Well, even to go to the posts themselves, that was a practice for me. When we first started, I had taken a personal break from social media after being in PR and communications for so many years. Before I started the cooperative, we took kind of like an unschooling pause where we just floated through our day and we intentionally were ready to get ourselves super bored together to see what happened and to like deconstruct the structures that we had been in for so long to see what had happened. And we had no idea what we were doing was called unschooling at the time. So I had been off social media for a while and I had a lot of people asking me, what do you do all day? What do you do all day? And so those posts were actually out of a commitment of mine to recap out of gratitude how I really used my day. Because when I didn't stop to do that, I would start to question what I was doing here and its effectiveness. So when I really paused to look, it really kind of became this beautiful, we did a lot today, even though it felt like we played all day. But, education was essentially, in my experience, definitely my children, if you were to interview them, might have a different experience. But when I was younger, the education, it wasn't that it was boring. It was actually, I was rather numb during most of it. I don't remember my experience in education. I heavily remember my being plugged in socially and talking to my friends and playing sports, but so many moments in the classroom, my mind would be completely gone, blank, quiet.
Yeah.
Did not even know what you just said for 30 minutes, kind of a situation. So that kind of recapping where the daily posts had come from. And if you notice, my children, one of mine requests not to be on social media, and we have some families that do the same. So we don't show the faces of the kids. And that's why it's like of their feet or their hands or of their creations. So I love challenging myself throughout the day to find how to capture the essence of what they're doing without having to rely on videos or footage of them. It's fun.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
nice. And the posts are so amazing because, God, I wish I had a school like that growing up. You know,
Yeah, it's so people say that all the time. You had originally asked, what's a day in the life here? And what I can say out of the gate is we always start with a question of we have a plan, right? So we build our curriculum, we have a structure, we've got a scaffolding that the kids are kind of moving through, whether it be math or science or history or art or whatever that might be. The question we always lead with every group here kicks off with journaling in the morning, and we just check in with where everybody is.
mm,
And we don't step over much, right? Because we're such a small group. For example, our community last year in May, we had a tornado come through our community, and the kids met here the day after that tornado, and we didn't step over. It's really hard to sit still and have this educational conversation. I
mhm.
couldn't distract them if I tried, right? Kind of a
Yeah.
thing. And so we leverage nature and our somatic techniques, our outdoor classroom spaces, the ability to run, to kind of diffuse what's in the body. And so that's how we start our day. We do the cores, right? Of reading, writing. And then every month we have an overarching theme. So we do thematic education, which means we pick something of interest inside of our group. It could be last year we did simple machines and engineering. It could be we did Leonardo da Vinci's inventions, and the kids made his flipper gloves that Leonardo da Vinci had created, and they had to make these like massive contraptions for their hands. And we had a kid make boots to walk on water. And so it's very interest driven as the overarching theme. This month, we're right now in reflection of Black History Month. And so we did this whole science lesson on who invented stoplights. And if you don't know, you might want to go and see why we have stoplights. And then we played like red light, green light in a twisted way that the kids create, right? So it's very much an embodied relationship that prioritizes curiosity and education over the lecture style teaching of education so that it can meet the child and frankly me where I'm at,
Yeah.
where they're at, and their interests.
Gosh, that is so awesome. I
It's
wish
really fun.
I just wish it was everywhere because just the check-in, doing the daily check-in, like where you at? Like somebody actually cares to know where you're at and what's up with you.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean, that was a big part of mine. I used to volunteer. My kids did go to a public school. Well, two of mine did. Nora, we started kindergarten and homeschooling. But any teacher that I bring in to the cooperative, I really talk a lot about what I learned in the unschooling process with my own kids, with teaching somatic practices at other schools, is that connection is paramount. Like, even in jobs, right? Like having worked in the professional environment, when we're seen and we see people and we acknowledge where everybody is at, we're brought into the fold versus left on the outskirts. And
yeah.
so just by the sheer lack of like smaller class sizes and the fact that the families are heavily involved, so the families know each other, there's not necessarily, it's very difficult in this kind of environment to not be seen and to fall to the wayside. And that feels really important to me.
It is so important. And those relationships are so important. And it's great to hear that the families are actually involved more than typical education systems would be. And how important that is for mental health of our children.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're seeing so many kids struggle these days with mental health issues, and it's not top of mind in the regular public school systems.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of the mental health part of it, I wouldn't even say that it doesn't happen here. Like I tell families a lot, I get asked this a lot actually, is this is so much better for their mental health. And part of what I say is even as adults, it's like you can have all of the healthy life structures, and it's not that tragedy won't happen. And it's not that depression won't seep in from whatever way it seeps in and finds us at some point, right? But it's really having the place that can handle it and manage it, and it not be something that the child that's depressed, that's acting out or showing signs of being lethargic and unresponsive and not instigating in the classroom, like instead of it just continuing to ride with not a lot being addressed. And there are some schools out there that like their counseling programs are fantastic. Their teachers are trauma informed. There are systems that are happening in our education system that I do think I've met a lot of educators. The way that I used to say it in my own house was it felt like the roll of the dice on if you would get one of those educators each year for your child or not. It wasn't the majority that had the skill set. And a lot of times we were in situations where teachers for our own children were put in classrooms because someone left, like they were filling a gap, right?
Right. Right.
But anyways, just for, having the resources of nature as checkpoint number one has been incredible. Art therapy, we integrate a lot of art therapy. Music is a must. We do a lot of theater. We do a lot of yoga, somatic-informed yoga. We do, just so many modalities that just by their own nature are therapeutic.
Yes. And very instructional, very informative. And, there are ways that those modalities help support the children holistically.
Right.
Right. And so many, art therapy just touches all parts of their mind, body, and spirit, right? And nature, mind, body, and spirit, and dancing, and it's beautiful to see.
It's really interesting too when you take out grading out of the equation, where we've been in it long enough that I forget about that part, right? So it's kind of, I have to go back to kind of remember what that was like for my oldest, who's 15 now, but she was a high achiever. She was in what they call the GT, gifted and talented programming at her middle school and all the way through from second grade on. And inside of that program, when we started to unschool, we went through this phase where she was really triggered or upset when I would tell her, pick any book you want to read, and then let's formulate a project from that reading. Like, let's reflect on it and let's stop each chapter. And she would say, just tell me what you want, black and white. Like, why do I have to come up with everything? And I'm like, well, you're creating your, so just that. She was really good at regurgitating. She was really good at achieving what someone would give her to do with very black and white rules. But given the freedom and the autonomy to poke into her own interests, felt really unsettling, unsafe, not secure for her. So that took us a little bit of time to do. Yeah, it's very, going back to a day in the life here, it's very creative and it can go multiple directions in a session because it's not driven by we're going from point A to point B. It's we're going to point A, we're going to get to F, and you get to decide how you're going to get from A to F. What do you think? Right.
And that can be a tall, daunting order. So no wonder, right? No wonder your daughter had issues with that. And I think it's sort of my type. If somebody asked me a point blank question like that, I don't know what to say. I go completely blank, and it's like, so I totally get it. But
right.
How cool it is to plant the seed for that and to nurture that and to honor that. And so that's like a blank slate for a child in being able to create anything.
Right. Right. Yeah. And being at the same time, it's like slowing down a little bit to deal with whatever the response is from our, psyche, biology, from the emotional side of things. Like, yeah. And they still know, like we talk to the kids a lot about distractions are effective.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you were overwhelmingly hot in nature and you're taking a walk, distracting yourself with something you enjoy will not have you focus so much on being hot. So not saying that like the kids will, I think a lot of people think that kids who are super turned into their feelings can be a sign of like weakness or overwhelm or anxious, right? It can kind of turn them into this like ever living petri dish, but it's really learning the cues of their bodies so that as adults, they're not making their environment or their people around them responsible for fixing or identifying or leveraging against them or manipulating or however it comes out for those of us who weren't really given an environment to freely understand why we were acting or reacting or given what we were given. Yeah.
Wow. It's fascinating, and I love so much what you're doing there. It's just so cool. I love it. So you didn't start out doing this, and this, your blank, what I consider your blank now, has been a process. So what inspired you? I mean, you talked a little bit in the beginning about wanting to start it for your kids and all
Mhm.
of that. Permission, to say, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make it happen and I'm committed. What
Yeah,
was like the line in the sand for you?
good question. If I were to look back at the dip of a toe, to be quite honest, when I dropped my 15-year-old off at pre-K, it was a like private school, very cute, nature driven. It had animals. I knew some of the teachers that were there, and I pulled out of the driveway and got kind of teary. And I called my husband and I said, I feel like somebody should be paying me to take her. And every year that I dropped my kids off somewhere, for lack of a better way to describe it, I just had this unsettling feeling. Not that the place was wrong, not that the
Yeah.
environment was broken, not that the people in it were terrible. Not, I didn't even have the fear of everything we face in Texas, gun violence or whatever there might be. I made sure I even picked a very specific school district and led my life in a way to keep me living around that school district so that my children could go where I thought would be best. But there still was the way that I describe it is that it felt like I was taking my child's star-shaped selves and just every year forcing them into the round hole.
Wow.
And yeah, and I just would describe it like I would go to, and the redirect for me personally was, well, what do? I have to go to work. I went to college. So do I
Yeah.
just have a child and then that all stops? Because I'm very driven and passionate in my career. I'm not somebody who's upset going to work either. I really loved what I did everywhere. And so whenever Evie was in, my oldest child, 15, was in second grade, I started getting a lot of calls from the nurse. And we actually kept her at home, like a private school setting until second grade. And there were a lot more kids in that class. And so, long story short, um, when she started showing signs of anxiety, I got trained in practitioner play therapy. And at that moment, I knew there had to be another way than just doing connection after school. And I started researching homeschool programs and what it would take. I would Google, how does one homeschool and work at the same time? So it really started with my oldest child teaching me for the first time what it looked like inside to develop a human in this world with the resources that I had. And I just knew it had to be a different way. Or I
Yeah.
felt like what I was compromising was her internal gifts were going to be unrealized. And if they were unrealized as a child, they were going to have to be uncovered in some way later on because she was wanting to perform and do good and be good. And what the system's definition of good was very different than my own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a statement, right? For sure.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's where the honor roll and perfect attendance didn't really light me up. And I knew probably wouldn't matter in her life at 30. So then I had to ask myself, what is it? Like, what does matter? And why does this keep tapping me on the shoulder? And why is it this way? And why are we not talking about this with more people? And,
Yeah.
it was just kind of, and I would come home and talk about it at home. And every year we would go through this whole, like, it's got to be different. And having all the teachers meetings and all the conversations. And so ultimately for me, when COVID hit, online education was not working with my children. I would come in and find my 12-year-old asleep, and my husband was working in healthcare at the time, so it did not stop for him. I ran my own business at the time in healthcare, and that did not stop for me. So we were both working more than full time, and we had 3 children at home, and 2 of them online, and one was a kindergartner who would just essentially, she would raise her hand, and at the end of a session, she would be sobbing and saying, she didn't see me. She didn't see me, is what she kept saying. So we found her a homeschool by her house, by her old kindergarten teacher. And so she got to find a homeschool community. And that's when we also removed our oldest child and started doing a homeschool program with her. And that was kind of the thing.
Yeah.
As far as the cooperative, we moved. So I knew that when we moved out to the country, right? So we moved from the city into the country. And I knew that with that decision, there would become a smaller community. We'd have to meet people, right? Like my children would need social connection. So why I started the co-op was after our first year of homeschooling in the country, I interviewed my girls and I said, what worked and what didn't work? My youngest said, just want to party more. And I was like, oh, that's good. And then my second said, I really miss friends. And my oldest said, to be really honest, she said, I really miss being taught by someone who's passionate about what they teach. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot stand math. Like, I could not fake being excited about math. If you were to say, Tiffany, I'm going to mail you $1 million if you could be excited about algebra, I would not be able to figure out how to do it. So I knew what she was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
We want an environment of passion.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And curiosity and creativity and being able to nurture that. And it's not linear. It's not A to B, it's like A to Z, and trying to figure out how to get there is like, and every child is different. Every child learns differently. And I think our system is such that kids have to learn this way. They have to learn this curriculum and they have to take these tests. And it's so, I think, isolating, right, for our kids and for their creativity. And there's no room for expansion of that, I think, in some of the systems.
Yeah. I mean, I have seen personally the world evolve in a way that is kind of questioning, how will my children survive, financially in the world? How will they feel free to make a difference versus constrained with whatever they need to produce in the world that it is they choose to go out and do and produce. And I think also owning that very few of us are a one-track life, so it's like training and conditioning for one job and one expression in one place. I think those days are coming to an end. We're having multiple capacities and multiple skills and expressing multiple interests and accepting that part of you as not being a not finisher. Overcoming shame and accepting ourselves is a paramount to one of the things that we instill here. If you don't know a concept, shame is not, I'm not going to manipulate a child by being ashamed of what they know or they don't know. Right. And I think that that's a really hard thing for a classroom to create, is a shame-free area, because you can't always control what triggers shame inside of a child's experience.
That's true. That's true.
So it's being able to take the time and have the freedom and the environment for that as well. But yeah.
And to nurture the freedom of that,
Yeah, as it's grown, it's been different. It's not the same as when I had 6 kids that were here. When we started it was out of those interviews with my children. And we were just kind of getting together and we were like, I'm homeschooling and I'm homeschooling. So let's get the kids together for these parties and the social life. And that's what we did. And as it's shaped from there, adding more children into the fold has just been remarkable. It's so beautiful to see what diversity and inclusivity brings to the educational process, because one person over there doesn't think the same way I do here. And I'm seeing this and I'm hearing it and I'm watching them and I'm learning from it. Even if I don't understand it, disagreements, kids are learning the social systems of community by being together and having the opportunity to talk that out and navigate that. It's really pretty brilliant. I had made a post the other day that I was like, man, I forget, because I've been at this for a few years, that we do not waste a single beautiful day.
I love that so much.
I do too.
Single beautiful day.
I mean, not one. It's like, if it's pretty, we're outside. If it's raining, we're probably still outside, but we really don't waste a single beautiful day.
And you know what? The kids are going to remember those experiences more than anything else. They really are, because their mind, body, and spirit was all involved in the process of the learning, right? It was a holistic learning,
Right.
and so that's stored. That's stored in tissues, moving forward. And they're going to remember that fondly, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's really sweet. And I always tell families who call or interested or that we work with here, or I'll host days for adults to come out, and I call them somatic days, and we do different modalities to help the nervous system. And at whatever moment in time we're together, which undeniably what I'm learning as an adult doesn't have to be forever for it to be remarkable. The goal that I've experienced just being in this space is that for this checkpoint and whatever time a kid is here, that they feel curious and excited and loved and respected and heard. And, and if they move on to something else and they move on to another area, that you're right, that it's like those neurotransmitters in the body are there for that moment in time, and whatever those messages have in the future and whatever that gift it gives at the time is just perfect, and whatever it's supposed to bring to them then.
it's beautiful. That's beautiful. So how if parents want to reach out to you, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, my website is somaticallyrooted.com.
Okay.
We are in the Texas area, and we're about 25 miles north of Dallas. We're on a lake, but I'm always open. I get messages all the time from people all over just asking, how did you get started? How did you do? And I am so passionate about this kind of education for kids that I'll answer. If anybody just wants to talk shop, I'm open.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Great. And do you have any events or anything that you would like to share with our audience?
I have a somatic day for adults on March 23rd. And then we are most likely going to open up.
Cool. Awesome. And we'll have all this. Yeah, of course. And we'll have all this in the show notes as well. So I have thoroughly enjoyed having you on today, and that is a wrap. I want to thank you so much for joining me. It was so great hearing all about your journey with the school. And if you enjoyed this segment, feel free to add comments, as we'd love to hear from you. And if you'd like to receive notifications of future episodes, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope you have a beautiful day. Thanks, Tiffany.